Well, welcome to this special edition of Behind the Pages. Nancy Rappaport, a special welcome to you.
Thank you.
I know that you're here today to talk about the one-woman show that you put together, that you wrote and produced, that is really detailing some of your experiences of having been diagnosed with breast cancer, your recovery from that illness, and where you are today. Meg, as the curator of the Mount Auburn Cemetery, in this lovely setting where we are sitting, we're happy to have you here to talk about the cemetery a little bit and how it's open to the public and people have found comfort in healing within its confines.
Delighted.
Nancy, I'd like to start talking to you about your diagnosis of breast cancer. What was that like? How did you first find out that you had breast cancer?
So, August 2015, I went in for annual MRI. Annual scan, and which I encourage any of your listeners to get. Actually, that's the way the play starts out, where I say 5 more minutes before my breast MRI, and I'm standing. I always get a little nervous before a test like this because it could be a turning point, and you could. I could go from being a doctor to a patient and think about mortality. And I had lots of normal mammograms, and this time the doctor said that they saw something the size of an eyelash, and that they needed to know more about it. And that basically rocked my world. It's the kind of diagnosis that I got is a relatively benign diagnosis. It's called DCIS, disseminated carcinoma in situ, and it was stage 0, which is actually 0 is good.
The best.
Yes. For those of us who haven't had to encounter cancer. But it still was enormously scary. And I ended up having a mastectomy in October of 2015. I'm 100% recovered. And in that process, I started to come to Mount Auburn Cemetery, which some people would say is a sort of weird thing to do, maybe. My hope is that people will understand that we all have one thing in common, which is that we're going to die, and that we, at certain points in our life, may think about that more deeply. And even though I have more to be and to become, I intend to live to 93, I had to kind of wrap my mind around mortality to get strong.
And certainly that moment that you're describing when you were told there was something abnormal on your scan, that's a fear that we all live with as women, because we know what the percentages are, and we
Huge,
know
1 out of 8.
Yes, and so we know it could be any of us. And I think that's why your one-woman show is going to be particularly meaningful to all people, because women worry about breast cancer and of course other kinds, but we know that none of us
There's a certain vulnerability that we have,
Yes.
just by the fact that we have, that we're women.
Yes, absolutely. So you're also a psychiatrist. How did your skills as a clinician help or hinder you from processing this?
So I'm a child psychiatrist, and I, as you know, wrote a memoir before about my mother's suicide in her, a hearse just drove by, in her wake, which was about my mother's suicide. And that was effort to use my skill as a child psychiatrist to talk about a traumatic event as a child and offer that for support to families who'd lost someone to suicide. So a big part of being a psychiatrist is helping build a narrative when people have been traumatized, and also to be respectful of the healing process. And for me, I had never, I'm an active person. I'm a marathon runner and just on the move. And that idea of having to slow down, and it was only a month, but I've never been sick in my life, so a month was a huge amount of time to be in bed. And I had to expand my repertoire and one of the things is I couldn't go to Walden Pond. I couldn't go running, so I came to Mount Auburn Cemetery as a way of walking and being in nature and feeling the solace of 4,000 trees here, and the sense of beauty of some of the monuments and statues. And so,
Well, how did you discover Mount Auburn Cemetery?
the first time that I went there was Meg. As I got an award called the Art of Healing at Cambridge Health Alliance. It's a really, I'm not putting on a brag sheet, but it was one of my proudest moments. And Meg, they had an auction and at Cambridge Health Alliance, and one of the auction items was a walk in Mount Auburn Cemetery with Meg. So I got to go
behind the scenes.
Yes,
Special walking tour.
and she brought me to, and that time that was 2 years before I was diagnosed, so I was definitely just coming in as a tourist to Mount Auburn. And she showed me this, one of my favorite statues here, which is Hygeia, goddess of health and hygiene. And it was commissioned by Dr. Harriet Kezia Hunt, who was one of the first female physicians in America. And at the time, I was looking at it as inspiration because she was devoted to taking care of prostitutes and their children back in the 1850s. And there was no antibiotics, 40% of women were dying from childbirth. So she was like this inspiring doc that Meg showed me. And then I didn't come back until this all came on. And then I started.
And did you and Meg know each other prior to that?
Yes, our husbands are good friends, and we've known each other since 1993 or even before that. But Nancy started to come in just for a hug. While she was walking.
I like her
She
hugs.
was coming every day, and then she'd come in to go for a walk. And then I was busy because I was working, so I
She has a day job besides walking me.
It's full time right here.
I ended up sending her to see things, to see certain things, or Nancy would come in and say, I want to see Dorothea Dix. Where's Dorothea Dix? Or what can you show me today? And I'd send her out.
Margaret Fuller, Edward Booth. There's a whole host of people here that some of your listeners might want to see.
Is Isabella Stewart Gardner?
She is. She's buried right on the banks of Auburn Lake, which is behind us.
Oh, I didn't realize
This
that.
is like the who's who of Massachusetts.
I guess so.
They're nearly
lesser known too.
there are nearly 100,000 people buried here on
wow.
the 175 acres, and many stories to be told.
How did you become connected with the cemetery?
Well, I moved from New York to Boston in 1993, and I walked down the street and fell in love, and I started to volunteer. And I began really crawling around, trying to find out the signatures, trying to see if I could find out who the artists were, because I'm an art girl. I love art.
She had
my
worked in a New York
passion.
gallery.
I was an
Okay.
art gallery director before moving to Cambridge, and I just fell in love with the artwork that was on the grounds, and with identifying who did them, who the makers were, who the carvers were, and what the stories were behind them. And the horticulture and the trees are so beautiful here, and the landscape is so beautiful. That combination of the two things I love the most, of nature and art, and so knit together in this landscape, just held me. And I fell in love, like many people do, with this landscape. And then was able to create a position of curator here to help take care of not only
For over 20
what's on
years
the
she's been here.
grounds.
Wow.
Yeah,
Pretty
since
amazing.
1983.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I hadn't realized until recently that cemeteries were really the motivation for creating public parks, because they are very beautiful places, and it used to be the only place where poor people could come with their families and picnic or have some
right.
time. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, they're being rediscovered right now, I think, cemeteries as green spaces in urban environments. The founders of Mount Auburn in 1831 were bringing nature and this beautiful picturesque landscape into an urban area so that Bostonians could bury their dead in a beautiful landscape that would be inspiring to the living and comforting to the bereaved, and would provide permanent burial. And these green spaces are really part of our conservation history in this country, where Mount Auburn was the first designed landscape open to the public in North America. So people would come here and they could see artwork. The Museum of Fine Arts hadn't opened, the Museum of Science hadn't opened. 1831, this was a very new designed landscape, and it was very crowded. Today, more than 200,000 people visit every year, and in the 19th century it was more than that. It's a very popular tourist destination and really set the stage for our American parks and for subdivisions and suburbs in this country.
Also integrated was one of the things that you talked about.
Yes. Integrated landscape,
But I
art.
thought also African Americans and whites.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, integrated
that's
on
huge.
that
The
level.
many cultures.
It was from 1831, from the beginning, the cemetery was open to every faith and every religion. So if you could pay, you could stay. It was open to all. And,
Hard truth.
So there's a range of people buried here.
And isn't Mount Auburn one of the first 3 public cemeteries that weren't like associated with a churchyard?
Yes, Mount Auburn's the first rural cemetery in this country. And then people would visit from all over America, and they'd go back to their cities saying, we want one too. We want one in Buffalo, we want one in Cincinnati, in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, and then later Forest Hills, which is our neighbor, very nearby. So, and Forest Hills was designed by Henry Dearborn, who designed Mount Auburn Cemetery. Many people think Olmsted designed it because it's such a beautiful green space, but he was 9, and it was really founded by members of the...
Olmsted was 9, not Dearborn.
Olmsted was 9.
Yes.
Olmsted was 9.
Understand that.
And so the founders were members of the Massachusetts Horticultural Society.
You can see how much she loves the cemetery, can't you?
I know, and I can see why it's inspiring to someone like you. That when you suddenly feel like, oh, I need more than my friend. I need my friend and her surroundings. And
She was a muse. She was introducing me to the richness of this world.
Well, you can imagine that if you say that you work in a cemetery at a cocktail party, people oftentimes run the other way.
Try saying you're a psychiatrist. I always tell people I'm off duty.
So
you're right, because if you want to tell them, spend my whole career, so any jokes you have, for them.
yes. So imagine loving this place so much and having Nancy arrive and say, "Tell me everything."
I was
you
like a
know.
puppy dog.
I want to know everything that you know. Show me. That's very satisfying.
As you walked around, Nancy, you were also writing at the same time?
Well, I was writing emails to my friends and family because I would get lonely during the day. This was my big event, was to come walk here. And, I'm practicing child psychiatry as associate professor. I write a lot and doing things, and then I was like home. And so I didn't want people to forget me. So I would send them descriptions of being at Mount Auburn and the thoughts I was doing. And I don't think I'm like Thomas Mann, but some authors, when they get sick, they have an inspiration, and I definitely felt as if, particularly with my poetry, which is in some of the one woman show, that that was, I don't want people to think I'm weird, but it felt like a visiting. It felt like I have this one poem that I start the one woman show is, I rushed to the dell in this large wooded amphitheater, an audience of one, to hear the owl's dusk crooning. And the dell, if anybody wanted to see a place that's spiritual, it's where back in the 1800s, Meg would tell you the exact year, but where Judge Story came to consecrate the Mount Auburn Cemetery. And when you go there, this is in Cambridge, you can still hear owls. If you go at dusk time, the owls come. I was doing a dress rehearsal, and right at the point where I had a letter where I'm reading a letter to my poor husband about a favorite stone I have, which is a letter from the husband to the wife, the owl started to croon in the dell. And where else in Cambridge can you go, or Watertown, can you go here at dusk, owls crooning?
I know.
And that's spiritual. And that's, to me, was remarkable.
What was it like for you explaining to your family that have you always been the rock?
Brutal.
Yeah.
We all should not say that kind of thing. To say to your family, you know, I have breast cancer, and a radiologist described when you first find something, it's like looking through a keyhole. So you don't know at the beginning, is this metastatic? Am I going to need chemotherapy? So, you know, that, but I have an amazing family. So they were, they're coming to my one-woman show, and, you know, I'm sure in some ways the idea that our mother is doing a one-woman show at Mount Auburn Cemetery is a little bit of, you know, I think they understand me, and they know the nature of who I am, and they know I'm 100% recovered, but it's still...
Well, now this is the first of some scheduled performances that you have, and the first are right here in the cemetery, October 1st and 2nd.
At 3 p.m. at the Story Chapel, which is in Mount Auburn Cemetery. Easy parking.
Yeah, and then you're hoping to expand this, and
I
you have some other
have
dates? And
some other dates, and people are welcome to go to my website, which is Nancy Rappaport. I designed it so it's 45 minutes with a Q&A, and I did that because I also want to be able to do it for grand rounds, which is a fancy name for doctors coming together and talking. But I wanted it to be an education, because I think I'm in a unique position as being a doctor and a patient, and I think sometimes as a doctor, and this is with due respect for doctors, but we can be a little bit cavalier about responses. A mild MI, a mild heart attack, DCIS, we can forget that this has a profound impact on patients feeling vulnerable. So that was something I wanted to bring in. Also, again, I have very grateful to my team of providers, but sometimes people can say things. So I have a scene of being in an operating, you know, right before I'm going in the operating room, and some nurses are talking about what's going to happen next, and they don't realize that I'm overhearing. So I want to remind doctors and patients of the sacred nature of the work that clinicians do.
Yes, right. So from their perspective, well, she didn't even have metastases. She,
Right.
You know, this is really not a big deal.
This is drama.
Yeah.
I mean,
but that's not the way it is when it's...
no,
when it's
our basis, our safety is our health. And when that's threatened, you got to come up with some ways to move forward and be grounded and anchored. And people have all different ways of healing. Some people walk in Mount Auburn Cemetery and write woman shows. Other people, I reach out to friends. You know, we have all the different ways.
Nancy's play incorporates poetry, prose, dramatic readings, but that's one of the themes that I find so compelling, is that you as a doctor are a patient, and that you've turned yourself inside out because you have the tools she has the tools to help other people, and I find that really, really exciting.
So your one-woman show, who do you see, in what ways do you see this helping both providers and other patients, other people experiencing
Well,
illness?
first of all, I hope theatergoers go to it, because I worked really hard to learn how to act good.
People
Actually, yes, I do want to take a little sidebar for a minute and ask you about that. So you had no prior acting experience?
I don't want to undersell myself, but the last time was probably in high school when I was Caliban in The Tempest, and then The Wicked Witch of the West. So I was fortunate enough to have a wonderful director, Pamela Rickard, and I traveled to wherever she was to take I've spent about a month in a tutorial with her so that I could master as best as I could the acting tools.
Right.
And then I also hope that people who love Mount Auburn Cemetery come, so because this is my love letter to Mount Auburn Cemetery. It's my way of thanking both the staff who are the caretakers of this incredible location. It's my love letter to Meg. so those are, and then, you know, I think personal narratives can be challenging. I would imagine if you're in the throes of first getting the diagnosis, or you're at stage 4 and you're fighting for your life, you don't have the energy to see this. But if you're looking for a way, and so people have told me that they're bringing friends who may have cancer, who might find some comfort or inspiration from watching it. And the way that I would want them to find inspiration is, there's a movement that happens when you, at least for me, when you have cancer, where you move from strength to vulnerability, and hopefully you move back to strength. And that's what I'm trying to show, is that we are challenged sometimes in our lives, and have to dig deep. And where do we find quiet fortitude? Where do we find the capacity to confront what we may be afraid of, and not to make it like, I'm not totally fine with dying. I would be really pissed off if I died tomorrow. I have a lot I want to do, but how do you manage the idea that we're going to die sometime, and still stay present right now?
Yes. Because I think that one of the things that I read about cemeteries, that they are not just a place to visit the dead, but they're also a place to understand that we are present, and so let's appreciate every day that we're here.
Yeah. Once I had a radiologist who said to me, when in discussing about plastic surgery, he was like, most women don't want to be reminded every day when they wake up and look in the mirror or take off their clothes or put on a bra that they have cancer. And I get what he's saying in one way, but in another way, I think, I don't know if that's so true. I think to wake up and there's not to be academic-y, but there's this one of my favorite papers is called Count Your Blessings. And they did a study where they looked at people who do count their blessings in the morning just for 2 weeks, and it has a 6-month impact on mood.
I believe it. Yeah.
So, you know, not to be Pollyannish, I would have definitely loved to have kept my breast and not to have had cancer. But if you're going to have a health challenge, you might as well find a way to integrate it.
Right, you have a choice. I mean, you have a choice that you can focus on, why me, I'm suffering, I don't like this, I want it to go away.
It's a good place to be at first.
Right. Well, you're going to end up there at some point, you know. But the other part of that is, what do you want? What's your goal? What do you want to move toward? And it sounds like you're really trying to work toward, you know, how is this going to impact my life, and how do I go on? What are the changes? But it wasn't, when is my life ending? It's, what am I doing with this?
Right.
In my life.
How do I come out stronger?
Yeah.
And how do I come out in a way where so this is, when you ask me, almost everything I do is through a calling. When I take care of my patients, it's a calling. When I wrote my memoir, it was a calling. And this is my offering. This is something I don't do this without a certain amount of trepidation. I'm not exactly getting naked in front of people, but I'm sharing something fairly intimate. And my goal has, just like with life, you want to offer humor and a sense of excitement and reflection. So that's the fun thing about literature or plays, is you're compressing it. So you're taking an experience that is a little bit amorphous, and you're moving it and shaping it. So ideally, someone doesn't have to go through this experience to get the kind of insight, but can
and certainly
grow.
Can know that they're not alone in their feelings, you know, and maybe have some guidance of what kinds of ways to turn things around, to just turn your focus toward something more positive that you can appreciate. Which it sounds like it's what you did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yes.
I hope you'll be there.
Yes.
Yeah, front row.
Yes, thank you. I will be happy to be there with pleasure. Now, the show, I think I read, is not a linear. I was diagnosed,
Oh,
this
no.
happened, and then that.
That would be deadly.
Yes.
Well, sorry. Bad pun. But, it, you know, I love literature. And I actually had a dramaturge help me, Emily, and because it's fairly sophisticated how to not make each scene isolated, but to have you draw and to have a transition that moves you into the next place. So it has a back and forth movement where the themes are connected, but it's not, I got diagnosed, then I had surgery, now I'm better. Because that, so it and the beginning is definitely the part of, okay, my world's rocked, and then it's around this intimate relationship I had both with Meg and with the cemetery, and how that moved me into a place of feeling like I have more to be.
Was there a lot that you had to cut out? I mean, did you write a whole lot?
Oh
and
gosh,
have to
so
cut back?
many. There is my favorite scene that I didn't get to do.
Oh.
There was one of the things that I. Sorry, can I tell you? I mean,
Yes,
because I won't
please.
get to
This is
do
your
it.
only opportunity to say
Yes, there was this great moment when, I didn't get chemotherapy, so I was going to the hairdresser and I was working my hair. I got my hair done today, and I was so happy because I didn't have chemotherapy. So I was like, okay, I have one asset that hasn't gone.
Yeah.
So I had this hairdresser who had tattoos all over her body, and I had her, and so I started to ask her questions about the tattoos, and each tattoo had more story than the other, and in a way, I also was thinking about breast cancer and that sometimes you get tattoos.
Yes.
And so I had the scene of the hairdresser, but it was a little bit of a detour. So it got folded into another scene, but I didn't get her in there, and I'm sorry because I loved her. She was really spicy, and she had some funny jokes, and I kept thinking it was being light, but the feedback I got was, it's a great scene, but it doesn't keep the play moving. So there's a saying in I'm sure you've heard it, but you have to kill your baby. So there's some things you just but I loved her. She's gone.
And all the poetry.
That I didn't
Late
have to.
night poetry.
You had to cut from
I
the
did.
song,
I had to. I end the poet. I mean, this is kind of funny, but there was one of the wonderful things Meg would do would be introduce me to the various amazing people that are who have devoted their lives to caretaking Mount Auburn. So there's this one man, Joe Martinez, and he's into reptiles. And the Dell has a vernal spring, which is a pond that has all these salamanders. And I wrote a poem about salamanders. It's a great poem, but my director was like, it's a little creepy to end the play with salamanders, so I had to get rid of it. So there are some things that got cut.
Yes. They live on somewhere in your writing.
It's actually on the second page of the program. It's called Love Play.
Okay, so
I'll leave it to your imagination.
Just put it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, I do look forward to hearing your performance on October 1st and 2nd.
Yes, at 3 p.m.
3 o'clock.
Story Chapel, which is easy
Right
to
at
find.
the right at the
right
entrance.
at the entrance
Even
of
I
the
found it, and
cemetery.
I can never find anything. when I'm
Me
trying
too.
to-
I'm direction impaired.
Right, me too. So I do look forward to that and to hearing that your show is sort of going out there, because it sounds like it can be of help to a lot of people.
I hope so. That's my offering.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for being so generous.